Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So this video is about Deuteronomy chapter 23, but before I get into it, let me talk about chapter 22, verse 28 again briefly. So there's 5 points I want to talk about here really briefly about why I've ruled that Moses was wrong to make the rule that he made, and how it's not a timeless rule on top of that. It wasn't a good rule for the time, and it's not a rule for this time right now. So first of all, Moses, let me tell you what the rule is first. Basically, they said if somebody rapes an unmarried virgin, that he has to pay 50 shekels, which is anywhere from 4 to 7 years' wages, is what I'm getting from the internet here. And that he would have to marry the person, and he can't ever divorce her. Now, I think that, what comes to mind right away is that a lot of women aren't that desirable. Guys get some kind of urge. They see a chick they want to have sex with, and a lot of people are rapists and they rape her. Most of the time, they don't want to actually marry her. Okay. And so there's various theories at play here. Some people are dumb enough to argue that somehow they would, get attached to each other and something good can come from it, which is very stupid. So my first point is that Moses wasn't allowed in the promised land. Okay, Moses wasn't known for his discernment, right? God gave him a task, and God chose him because God knew he was going to mess up. The message was even the most insightful of the Jews wasn't qualified to lead the whole world. This is a very important argument that I'm making here. There's a difference between me and them is my patriarchal line is different than the Jews, and they emphasize their patriarchal lines. Baal, perhaps first and foremost, was a deity of a certain patriarchal line. Look at the statues. Certain people had certain patriarchal lines, their father's line, and they would say, hey, this is going to be their line, right? And as a result, you had a bunch of Baalists and a bunch of, El-like people, to the point where the assembly of quote-unquote gods was called the Elohim, right? El-O-Him, Elohim, okay? So Moses wasn't allowed in the promised land because he was the offspring of Baal and El and things like this, and they weren't really qualified. Point number 2, and of course he did the wrong thing. He messed up, and a lot of people point to the rock where, he struck the rock with his stick instead of honoring God and doing it his way, and so on and so forth. It's a story for another day. Point number 2, he was talking to very stiff-necked people. Okay, so imagine a bunch of retards running around here. Now, I'm not saying the Jews were any smarter or dumber than anyone else at the time for the purpose of this video, except for the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, which obviously the top martial arts line is going to be smarter than everyone else, right? Especially the people God is using an example of what not to do, who are always not doing what he says, right? I'm sure we can all agree that's fair. It's a very obvious moral in the story. Unless you're kind of a Jewish supremacist or something, you might have a problem with it. Anyway, so imagine you're looking at a bunch of retards, okay, and their marriages always don't work out anyway, and so on and so forth. This is part of the story. It doesn't mean that it's what the authors had in mind. When we look at the 5 reasons that explain why it's being said, okay, it makes a lot more sense. Because you just tell somebody, hey, if you rape somebody, all you have to do is what obviously is insufficient, right? Is give them 50, give them 7 years' wages, okay, 4 to 7 years, and then marry them, right? You have to explain it, and they don't explain it. It's part of why I don't like the Bible. Not only is it confusing on purpose, they lie to you, and they mislead you with these explanations, and they kind of laugh and shake each other's hands. Not a coincidence that they're the offspring of Baal and El, and Baal is the deity of merchants, people laughing behind your back, and they talk about charging interest to foreigners and not to Israelites, and so on and so forth. Not a coincidence, all no way, no how. Torah is ha-rat scrambled. Tanakh is a play on words for at hoc, at in hoc, and tan hoc, it's Satan, A's tan, right? Being tan instead of being black is one thing you can get from it. But again, I'm not a racial supremacist, but that's one of the things in the wordplay that sticks out. So point number 3, they didn't value themselves very much. So if you get a bunch of whores in Vegas or something, and a bunch of people who don't care, remember, they're specifically accused time and time again of prostituting themselves, being sexually immoral, while prostituting themselves to other gods, right? Following other gods, right? Prostituting themselves in more than one form. So there's a bunch of prostitutes everywhere. And the virgins quite often are the daughters of prostitutes, okay? That doesn't mean you can rape them, But it helps you understand why he's saying this to these people who are stiff necked. They're not wise. Right? It says follies in the heart of a child, follies in unruly women. They live folly, so they're like an unruly little girl. Okay, so point number 4 is that's a sort of unfair punishment for them, right? As opposed to Isaiah 13, which suggests that people from the outside are going to be raping and killing them for their idolatry. They're doing to themselves. But however, the people who are going to be raping and killing them in Isaiah 13, which is occurring right now, mind you, are also idolaters. So again, keep in mind, I'm not a Christian, Muslim, or Jew, and I don't agree with Deuteronomy in its sum total form. I don't agree in how it's written. I don't agree with how it's written. I don't agree with some of the rules there. Point number 5, and of course, I'm the top martial arts ever. They're just some person who wrote a book. I mean, I'm sure we can all agree on that, unless you're insane or something. Point number 5, they follow Set, right? The Bible's Bible. At the time, historians recorded that the Jews were known for following Dionysus, who was a deity of ritual madness, religious ecstasy, theater arts, right? It's just a show. It's a game. Wine, grapes, rapes, organized madness, what have you. So really quickly, in chapter 23, it talks about exclusion from the assembly. It says no one who has had their genitals crushed or cut, with a weapon can come to the assembly. No one in a forbidden marriage, which means all the Jews in a forbidden marriage, which is the marriages that are approved by me, couldn't come to the great assembly, right? But they're all excluded. For everyone outside the divine order, it's just me, okay, because of one reason or another. So it says that there's no Ammonites or Moabites, not even in the 10th generation, which suggests that people who aren't Jews are in the Great Assembly, okay, which means that they're in a higher position than a lot of Jews in their own kind of culture, which goes back to Galatians 3:28. There's no Jew or Gentile, you're all one in Christ Jesus. Okay. It says, don't despise the Egyptians because you were foreigners in their land. The Edomites are related to you. Okay, so they keep hacking my phone and cutting the clips short, but really quickly, it's saying not to be a prostitute, especially not a shrine prostitute, and not to charge Israelites interest. It gives advice about what to do in regards to picking produce, grapes from your neighbor's vineyard and stuff like this, but there's not much more to the chapter, right? But keep in mind, people aren't supposed to prostitute themselves in any ways. They're not supposed to be a gold digger, not supposed to only date one race, they're not supposed to do things like that.